Hi class, welcome to Leadership in Nonprofit Organizations. I know you were expecting Dr. Sanborn, but he is under the weather, so you have me here today, and also Elena Marks. She's the CEO of Episcopal Health Foundation, a wonderful, wonderful woman who has taken time out of her day to be here, and so we appreciate that. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great. So one question, if we could just dive right into it.
Absolutely.
Well, why don't you start off by giving a little overview about what the Episcopal Health Foundation has done and how it kind of has changed since you've been there. You started during a critical time in its history a few years ago.
Well, we're still a relatively new organization. This organization was created in 2013, and it's the product of the sale of the St. Luke's Hospital System. The Episcopal Diocese of Texas owned St. Luke's, and they sold it to another hospital system, and they got $1,260,000,000 in proceeds, and they put all of that into a new organization that they named the Episcopal Health Foundation, and I got hired to run it and figure out how to help them improve the health of the people in 57 counties, about 10 million people in southeast and central Texas.
And so what is the focus of the foundation as a whole for students who haven't looked that up?
Our focus is on the health of communities with a particular emphasis on low-income and vulnerable populations. So most of our work is at the primary care level. We work a lot with community clinics that are serving basic primary care needs. We don't do hospital funding or biomedical research or anything like that, and we fund organizations that are helping low-income people become healthier, either because they are providing basic healthcare services or because they're working with communities on advancing social cohesion and community organizing and other community engagement kinds of activities.
That's great. So this week, what students have read in their book, have you heard of the Jim Collins book, Good to Great?
Sure.
So that's the book they read for this class. It is, an oldie but a goodie, as they say. So they are at the end of the book. They're in the very last chapter this week. And one of the main points of it is around what he calls big, hairy, audacious goals. And can you talk about your experience with kind of big goal setting and the kind of successful way that y'all have done that?
Well, I can talk about what our BHAG is, and whether we will achieve it is a long time coming. But I'll tell you how we decided what it would be and why we decided what it would be, and then a little bit about how we're trying to go about it. So our big goal really is transformation to healthy communities, and a lot of people use the word transformation, casually thrown around, and we intentionally use that word because when you look at the data about health status of people in Texas, particularly low-income populations, health status is poor. So whatever it is that we've been doing for however long we've been doing it, it's not working. And so we really feel that if we're going to change outcomes, we can't just do a little bit more at the margins. We have to do something really different. And so we chose the word transformation intentionally to signify that we think the change is really big in order to achieve the goal of allowing and enabling people to live healthy lives.
Wow, that is big.
Yeah, and it's not something we can achieve alone. It is likely not something that we can achieve in 5 or 10 or 20 years, but if we've set this as a milestone and we develop our 3-year, 5-year, and annual plans with a goal toward moving needles in that direction and keeping our eye on the long-term goal, then we feel like we'll be making progress to move in a known, intentional direction.
So in coming up with that goal, what was your role as the leader of the organization? I mean, you didn't just come up with it and say, everyone, we're doing this.
No, so we were brand new, and the great thing about this job is that I got hired by a fantastic board who said, we just want to help people with health. How do you think we can do that? And so we had really an open book to work with the board and decide what is it that we ought to achieve. And the bishop, who is my board chair and the leader of the diocese, is a very progressive and very ambitious man. And he really believes that his job as the leader of a church is living the gospel, and that you do that out in the community, serving other people, and not inside the walls of the churches. And he is the one who began using the word transformation. And in the beginning, I would sort of roll my eyes and go, I'm not a big fan of adjectives in the first place. And that seemed kind of corny. And the more we talked about it, the more it became obvious that we really did need to use big language, and that because we have more than $1 billion and we have a perpetual time horizon, we had to shoot for the moon, because if we had done anything less, we wouldn't be taking advantage of the opportunity to do something new and different and big with a whole lot of money and a long time horizon.
So does this make the $1 billion, does that make y'all the biggest or one of the biggest nonprofits in the Houston area?
It makes us one of the biggest. It doesn't make us the biggest.
That's still a lot of money.
It's still a lot of money.
Context.
But, if you think about it, we're not writing checks out of the billion. The idea is to actually grow the corpus and to spend proceeds. So our spend for this year will be about $32 million. Next year it'll be a little over $40 million. And while that sounds like a lot of money, we're trying to cover 57 counties with 10 million people and huge health needs and a lot of poverty. And so the money can go really quickly if you're not careful. And when you have idea, there's somebody who's either doing it or could do it alongside of you. And I'm not in favor. You would have to make a really compelling case for us to fund you as a startup nonprofit. We're just not interested. You have a great idea, that's terrific. Let us find somebody you can work with on that.
And you have an interesting perspective. Most people that we've talked to are running service nonprofits, and for the class to understand, Episcopal Health Foundation is a giving money kind of nonprofit.
Right. I mean, we do more than grant making. We have a research division. We produce original research. We also have community engagement people who do on-the-ground community engagement work. But yes, I mean, if you looked at our budget, most of the money goes out the door in grants, and the way we achieve our goals really is through the work of others. We're not running clinics. We're not serving clients directly in any way. And so for us to succeed, we need strong, competent nonprofits and governmental entities. We fund governmental entities as well.
So I'm just looking here at the questions on Twitter, and we have a question from Emily. What are some of other leaders that you admire, and why?
Do you want specific people, Em, or do you want characteristics?
Let's kind of maybe go with both specific people and their characteristics.
Okay. Well, in my current job, I have only one peer actually in Houston, and that's Ann Stern, who leads the Houston Endowment. And the reason I say that is because we are the only two large foundations that are engaged in the community and professionally staffed. And so while there are other large foundations and there are other professionally staffed foundations, there are not other professionally staffed foundations working on the ground in the community. And so to have somebody who knows what I'm doing every single day is really fantastic, and she's been in her job about 2 years longer than I've been in mine, and she has been a great mentor and friend to me, and I admire what she has done and what she has taught me how to do tremendously. There are a lot of great nonprofit leaders in Houston, and I would say that having a great CEO really is the make or break for whether an organization can do transformative work or whether it can just keep on delivering services. Some of my favorites, I would say Jenny Goldman, who recently left the leadership at Texas Organizing Project, Amanda Tim, who leads LISC. We have a lot of good nonprofit leaders in this community. So what I admire in a nonprofit leader is someone who knows where they need to be and is really focused on getting there, as opposed to someone who chases dollars and will vary their program and their mission based on where they think they can get money. And I know that nonprofits struggle to raise funds, but when you are willing to do whatever somebody will pay you to do, that to me is a weakness.
Definitely. So we had another question on here. Do you think gender plays a role in leadership positions in nonprofit organizations? And I would go further to say, do you think, do you see strengths and weaknesses in men or women, or do you think having a diverse staff is really important in terms of, we all know that that's really important, but just, we've had a couple of questions on here about gender.
Yeah. So I read everything in the popular press and the HR press that everybody else reads about differences in the way men and women manage. In my experience, it has been less about gender and more about sort of personality and style. So I don't think that all men are like this or all women are like that. You know, the nonprofit world has a lot more women in it than men, except in leadership positions where it has a lot more men than women, and that's true in corporate America as well. We have a very diverse staff. We have way more women than men. My leadership team is 6 people, and there are 4 women and 2 men.
Wow. And our students here, I had mentioned to you before class started, they're all very diverse in different parts of their lives, or in their different stages in their career, I should say. Some may be starting out and others may have been in nonprofits for a while. But in those different phases, what do you think is some really good professional development for them, or lessons that they should learn, or maybe, you know, big things that they should focus on?
Wow.
Because they want to be leaders in nonprofits.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I think that you can be a leader in any job that you're in, and that you ought to look for the opportunities to lead. And you can be the newest person there. You can be the receptionist whose job is just to answer the phone, and you have leadership opportunities by finding you know, the very best ways to do your job and communicating that to others as an example of not just saying, yeah, I know all I do is answer the phone, but showing that you have taken what many would consider to be a menial, boring, limited job and doing something with it, and that shows that you want to move to the next level and that you're thinking about moving to the next level. And you always hear people say, you know, dress like the job you want to have, not the job you do have, and things like that. So I think when you're always looking ahead, then you're more likely to get promoted. One of the things that is certainly true, and not just if you're in the gig economy, but people move in order to rise in organizations, and in the nonprofit sector, where many organizations tend to be smaller than in the for-profit sector, sometimes the only way you can move up is to move to a different organization. And I think that's okay. And particularly, I think about it in terms of my own staff. So we've got people in their 20s and we've got people in their 60s and everything in between. And when we are fully staffed, which will be at the end of next year, we'll have about 30 people. So the chances for upward mobility just aren't that great. It's not like we have, you know, 20 departments and 10,000 employees and you can sort of move around. There's just not that much opportunity for mobility. We have me, we have 5 people on the level below me, and then a handful on the level below them, and then everybody else. And so for people, the younger people, or early stage career people in our organization, to move up, it is likely that they will leave the foundation. And I'm aware of that, and I'm totally good with that. And I would look forward to our having enhanced their capabilities so that they move on to the next job, and we'll bring somebody else in. And likewise, when we need a new person, we are almost always taking people laterally who've had experience elsewhere. And so I think you need to be prepared to think of advancement, including movement, and that's not a bad thing. I think it's refreshing for you to learn different organizations, and it's just the fact of the matter in organizations that just don't have lots of opportunity for mobility, because, you know, everybody who works at Episcopal Health Foundation cannot become the CEO, because there's, you know, there are 29 of them and 1 CEO. So, you know, somebody else will be, because I'm not going to be there forever. But if all of them have that as a goal, most of them are going to be very disappointed.
Right. Let's go to another question from students. Oh, wait, that was a good one. How do you or other leaders in your organization communicate core values, or really, and I would add to that, you know, sticking to your mission statement every day? Do you have any examples of that?
You know, so we have a set of values that are written out. We have a mission statement, we have a vision, we've got goals, we've got strategy, we've got all of this stuff. We try to live into it. The times we're confronted with it, and when it really is the most valuable is when something's about to happen that would violate it. And that's when you know whether or not you're living into it, because something bothers you and you recognize it's bothering you because it's bumped up against one of the values.
Do you have an example of that?
I'm trying to think of one I can
that you can share.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I will give you an example, and it has to do with an organization not in Houston. We have a principle of non-discrimination in service provision. If you are whatever the services are you're providing, we will not fund you if you discriminate on really any basis, including employment status. And so there is an entity that we had previously funded, and before we had recognized that they were only, well, I guess we knew this, but we were kind of working through. So this is an organization that decided that it would not provide services to people who were not working at least half-time. And it's an organization that is intended to provide services to low-income populations. And so low-income and not working sometimes go together. And so we had a conversation with them about that's just not right, that's a judgment that they're making about someone being unworthy of their services because they're not living their life according to some principles that this organization believed people should live by. And long story short, when we sent them the grant agreement and specifically wrote in there that you cannot exclude from providing these services people who are not employed, they called and said, we can't sign that. And it's an organization that does really great work in an area of the state, in a rural area where there are not a lot of service providers. And we had to really say, you know, are we going to fund this or not? And we didn't. And we just said, sorry, we know you're the only game in town and we know that you're providing great service to the people you see, but you are making value judgments on the worth of an individual and denying service based on that, and we just can't go there.
Oh, that breaks my heart.
Yeah, well, welcome to rural Texas.
Right? Oh, that's true. Have they come back or anything? Do you think they'd change eventually?
No, we pushed them pretty far. They changed the requirement so that it wasn't that you had to be employed 20 hours a week, to now you have to be doing something worthwhile, which they define as working, volunteering in a meaningful capacity, caretaking, or being in a self-improvement course.
Sometimes you're just at home taking care of everyone and your health.
Well, if you could demonstrate that and that was okay, particularly if you were a woman, that would be okay. And then you could get services.
Wow.
Anyway, so this is an organization we will not be able to fund.
Interesting. Let's do one last question before we wrap up. How does your organization show transparency in your work?
In a lot of ways. So we have an evaluation department. We've got 2 people who do nothing but evaluation, and we evaluate every single thing we do. We have a plan that will take 3 years to fully operationalize, that will look at everything we do. It'll look at what the grantees do, and it will look at community level change. Not that we take credit for, but that has occurred while we were working in a community. And we publish these reports. Our financial statements are online. Our grant making is all online. We do these road shows around the 57 counties every year. We will talk to anybody about anything, and we feel completely comfortable doing that. A reason that it is easier for us to do that than a lot of organizations is that we're not trying to raise money. We are in this really unique position where we are earning our money through investments, and so we don't have concerns that a lot of groups have that if you show your warts, people will hold it against you. But one of the things that we try to emphasize with the nonprofits we work with is that we know everything doesn't go well. I mean, it just can't, or you're lying, or you're not reaching far enough if everything you've ever done is just perfect. And that's okay with us. We are in the business of taking risks and experimenting, and everything doesn't work out the way that you had hoped, and that's okay. But learn from it, own it, and let others know about it. And we work really hard to let our grantees know that they should not put on a facade for us to tell us that everything is perfect and that everything they've ever done has hit 100%, because we don't believe them, and if it is true, they're not trying hard enough.
That is interesting, as one of y'all's grantees. Well, I think, is there anything else before we wrap up that you think our students should know about nonprofit leadership, about their career paths, about working in a sector that can sometimes be difficult and stressful and rewarding and not all that lucrative for the most part? Anything else?
I don't think it's that different than for-profit leadership. I mean, leadership is leadership, and the way that you get an organization to be motivated to achieve whatever its goals are really depends on how you work with and lead people. And nonprofits are different, but I had an old friend who used to say nonprofit is a tax status, not a business model. And so I would say people moving back and forth between the for-profit and nonprofit and public sectors really have the broadest range of experience and have a lot to offer.
That's a great point. All right. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And class, I will actually be here next week with 3 peers of mine from different organizations. We'll be talking as emerging leaders, something that Elena mentioned in her remarks today, leading where you're at within an organization. So thank y'all for tuning in, and thank y'all for the great questions, and we'll see you next week.